The American Legion Post 63 organizational meeting was held on September 22, 1919, in the assembly room of the Putnam County Courthouse. Former Company M Captain Guy Cartwright was the temporary chairman, and Corwin Hipkins temporary secretary. Adolf Schmenck was elected to serve as the very first commander. The officers nominated and elected were as follows: Commander Adolf C. Schmenck, Vice Commander Ora J. Neal, Adjutant Henry Rappaport, and Treasurer George W. Colley. The Executive Committee was made up of Joseph Heckman, Edmund Keeney, Fred Reeves, John Hermiller, John Gulker, and Oscar Schirlo. The initial roster of Post 63 was comprised of 57 charter members. It was the veterans of World War I who conceived, founded, and set the American Legion on a course of duty to God, country, and the community. Post 63 meetings continued to be held in the courthouse assembly room until 1921. At that time, after arrangements were made with the state adjutant general, meetings were held at the armory. Initial dues in the early years were only $2, which included a subscription for the American Legion magazine. Membership in 1921 swelled to 136 as the Post began to become active in the community, supporting worthwhile charities such as the Red Cross and the Ohio Children's Home. Stanley Beckman led a group of Legionnaires in gathering and repairing toys for distribution to needy families at Christmas time. In 1920, Post 63 began sponsoring a local Boy Scout troop. Legionnaires Edward F. Emmons and Guy Cartwright were instrumental in promoting the Boy Scouts, with Evans serving as Scoutmaster. On May 12, 1921, preparations were made for Decoration Day services, and also for the funeral services for Private First Class Leo J. Koerner. He was a member of Company M during their deployments to the Mexican border and later Europe in World War I. Koerner was mortally wounded in France while on picket duty, becoming the first member of Company M to make the supreme sacrifice. There was a unanimous vote to change the name from Ottawa Post 63 to Leo J. Koerner Post 63. On Monday, May 16, 1921, Theodore Koerner received a message from the War Department that the body of his son, Leo, would arrive in New York around May 21st with a request for confirmation of shipping instructions. Mr. Koerner immediately wired asking that the body be shipped to Ottawa, Ohio. Private Koerner had been buried in France after being mortally wounded in August 1918. Koerner and some companions had been on a picket duty in advance of the Allied front line trenches. It was their duty to hold the enemy in the event of an attack until word and information as to the enemy could be sent to the front line. Their post was attacked, and after a vigorous fight, Leo was killed by an exploding hand grenade. Back in Ottawa, a short time before, Leo's father had received a letter from his son. In that letter, Leo stated that he had been in the front line trenches and expected to return there soon, adding he was prepared for death, if need be, in his country's service. At 9 o'clock on Saturday, June 5th, 1921, Ottawa Mayor William A. Beutler received the long-awaited telegram announcing that the body of Leo J. Koerner would arrive on the 10:35 train. He immediately requested that all businesses close and that all municipal flags be lowered to half-mast. The fire bell tolled as the citizens gathered to pay their respects. More than 1,000 met the body at the train station and escorted it to the home of Leo's parents, Mr. and Mrs. Theodore Koerner of East 3rd Street. The funeral march formed at the residence and marched to the Catholic Church, where Reverend Nish delivered the sermon. filled with sympathy to the bereaved family and his comrades in arms. After the services, the line of march reformed and escorted the body to the cemetery. The procession was led by the color bearers, followed by the Boy Scout band, Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, and more than 100 World War I veterans, again in uniform. The funeral car, pulled by 4 horses, was followed by family members and dignitaries. At the cemetery, the last rites of the church were performed. Post 63 Commander Felix Gulker then read resolutions adopted by the post. The firing squad then fired a salute of 3 rounds, the bugler sounded taps, and the body of Private First Class Leo J. Koerner was laid to rest. In April 1927, a motion was passed to change the name of the post to Koerner Slusser Post 63 in honor of the 2 local soldiers who lost their lives overseas in World War I, Leo J. Koerner and Glenn Dewey Slusser. Sergeant Slusser, who enlisted in the Marines, arrived in France in the fall of 1918 and was assigned to the 2nd Marines of Chateau Thierry fame. He immediately saw action in the Meuse-Argonne Drive, part of the final Allied offensive, which ended the war. Dewey lost his life November 3rd, 1918, when a large exploding shell struck him and 5 other boys who were with him. After the war, his body was returned home and laid to rest with military honors in the cemetery at Vaughnsville. On November 11th, 1918, only 8 days after Slusser's death, the armistice was signed. On April 16, 1934, Unit 63 of the American Legion Auxiliary received its official charter. The organizational meeting was held at the Dumont Hotel, with Post 63 Commander Stanley Beckman opening the meeting. The officers installed were Dorothy Stadler, President; Zelma Kirsting, First Vice President; Florence Roof, Second Vice President; Lori Labadie, Secretary; Ann Beckman, Treasurer; Mrs. Ora Neal, Chaplain; Edna Shirlow, Historian; and Vesta Salome, Sergeant-at-Arms. The auxiliary went on to be a strong asset to the post, with its positive influence and energy carrying on to the present day. The creation of the Boys State program is credited to Hayes Kennedy, who in 1935 was an instructor at Loyola University of Law in Chicago. Hayes was the Americanism chair of the American Legion in Illinois. Hayes and fellow Legionnaire Harold Card founded the program to counter the socialism-inspired Young Pioneers camps. Boys State would promote the value of our democratic form of government among our nation's youth. In Ohio, Buckeye Boys State began in 1936 and was held in the cattle barns at the Ohio State Fairgrounds. American Legion Post 63 named Robert Anesser of Ottawa and John Rower of Kalida as delegates to that first Boys State Convention. The following year, the post would send Tom Bruscutter and Jim Summers. Since 1936, over 90,000 boys have attended Buckeye Boys State, including Hall of Fame members Neil Armstrong, Rex Kern, and Randy Gradishar. In 1938, the commander of Post 63 was Clinton Felke, and meetings were moved to the council room of the new city building. Nationally, after some years of economic recovery, the United States slipped into another downturn and unemployment surged back up to 19%. On the world stage, Germany began its persecution of Jews, and most of the world cheered as America's Joe Louis knocked out Germany's Max Schmeling in the first round to capture the heavyweight boxing championship. British Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain, in hopes of averting another world war, flew to Munich and cut a deal with Adolf Hitler, which allowed Germany to occupy the Sudetenland. This effectively left Czechoslovakia defenseless. Chamberlain then flew back to London, declaring, "Peace in our time."